Our story begins with Qin Shi Huang, who was simply patrolling his newly unified empire when he encountered a white snake seeking a blessing. Instead of ordering his men to drive the creature away, the emperor decided to bestow upon it the title of Guardian Dragon of Qin. You see, this white snake was actually a reincarnated soul. As a spirit snake who has cultivated for a century, you face two paths: the trial of the flood to become a dragon, or seeking a human's blessing. The first is the orthodox way, requiring the aid of great floods or torrential rains. If one can successfully reach the vast sea, they transform into a dragon. Of course, this requires surviving heavenly lightning strikes. If the flood fails to carry the snake to the river, the trial is lost, and one must wait another century for a single chance. To be honest, it is a grueling gamble. This is why many bridges have long swords hanging beneath them, to prevent giant snakes from destroying the structures during their ascent. Compared to that perilous path, seeking a human's blessing is a shortcut. If the person acknowledges your divinity, you can borrow their destiny to advance your power and eventually take on a human form. Once you receive that person's destiny, you must repay them with treasures or protect them from disasters to settle the karmic debt. It is a fair trade, in a way. However, if the person denies you, the blessing fails. This means the attempt was a complete disaster, and the consequences are quite severe for the spirit involved. Not only is one's power greatly diminished, but the chance to become human may be lost forever. This often enrages the spirit, leading them to seek revenge on the one who denied them. At best, the person might suffer a grave illness. At worst, their entire family is ruined. And here we see your bold plan, choosing the mighty Emperor Qin Shi Huang as your target. You exhale a thick mist toward Zheng, the emperor. Within moments, his entire surroundings are enveloped in a dense, white fog, obscuring everything from view. Where did this mist come from? Soldiers, protect his majesty. Seeing the sudden fog, the great general of Qin, Wang Bin, immediately shifted into a state of high alert. He drew his bronze sword just enough to reveal the cold glint of the blade. We cannot blame Wang Bin for being so tense. The empire appeared stable, but danger lurked everywhere. Deep down, he knew the remnants of the 6 fallen kingdoms were still hiding in the shadows. They dreamed of restoring their old regimes and intended to assassinate Zheng. In fact, they had already survived 3 assassination attempts before this moment. This history of violence is precisely what made Wang Bin so incredibly on edge. The nobles and officials guarding Zheng turned pale with fright. They had never seen such a massive serpent before, and panic began to ripple through their ranks. Despite their fear, they stood before Zheng, gripping their standard-issue bronze swords and facing you. A white snake of this size was a terrifying sight indeed. The fact that it could speak the human tongue meant it was surely a legendary spirit. At this moment, your own heart is racing. This is the ultimate gamble. Whether you remain a snake depends entirely on Zheng's answer. He orders his men to stand down, and though your sudden appearance startled him, he is, after all, the first emperor. He possesses a courage and composure that ordinary men simply do not have, along with a depth of wisdom and knowledge. As he looks at the scene before him, he recalls reading in ancient books about mountain spirits and monsters. When such beings reach a certain level, they seek a blessing from a destined person. If they succeed, they can achieve immortality, and in return, the spirit must provide a corresponding reward to the one who blessed them. Zheng glances at you, then calls out to his retinue. He summons Meng Yi, and a civil official steps forward from the crowd to stand before the emperor. Out of the corner of his eye, however, Meng Yi is constantly sizing you up. There is a faint air of killing intent about him. Meng Yi is a high official of Qin and the brother of General Meng Tian. He is also one of Zheng's most trusted advisors. In this era, civil officials are not the frail scholars of later generations. These are men who have truly studied the art of killing and are fierce enough to fight on any battlefield. Seeing the spectacle, Zheng asks if this is like the spirit seeking a blessing mentioned in the classics. He seems almost impatient to know the truth of the matter. Upon hearing this, Meng Yi frowns as he realizes what is happening. Ever since the emperor's health began to decline, he has become obsessed with the arts of immortality. He worries his master is being led astray again. He admits it looks similar, but warns that for a white snake of this size to seek a blessing, it would surely drain the emperor's destiny. Meng Yi hesitates, but ultimately believes this blessing is far too risky. After all, according to the ancient records he has studied, seeking a blessing in this way is considered a heterodox path. It is essentially stealing the luck of the benefactor. This is a situation Meng Yi desperately wants to avoid. But Zheng merely snorts in cold dissatisfaction. He has swept across the lands and unified the world. As the first emperor of Qin, he asks why he shouldn't grant a divine title. He is the man who conquered 6 kingdoms to unite the 7 under one banner. To Zheng, facing a spirit seeking a blessing is hardly a cause for great alarm. Besides, he considers that while granting divinity might just be a legend, if it were true, it would mean that immortals and the secret to eternal life actually exist. And so, we see Zheng wave everyone back. He strides forward with long, confident steps until he is standing directly in front of you. Man and snake are now less than 7 feet apart, their eyes locked. Zheng can even feel the warm breath exhaling from the white snake's mouth. Your white scales are clearly visible, reflecting a pale luster and intricate patterns. If you truly wish to, you could swallow Zheng in a single bite. Yet, you find yourself unable to move, feeling a strange sense of trepidation. This is because you are facing the first emperor, a man of unparalleled presence. Even in his later years, Zheng possesses an unmatched aura that commands absolute awe. He declares that as the Emperor of Qin, he shall today grant a title on behalf of heaven. He declares, I grant you the title of Guardian Dragon of Great Qin. You shall guard the dragon veins of the 9 provinces, anchor our eternal destiny, and ensure Qin remains immortal. As these words leave his lips, the entire field falls into a deathly silence. Meng Yi breaks into a cold sweat, his face turning pale with sheer terror. He knows that if this blessing is real, such a heavy title could shake the very foundations of the empire's destiny. To be honest, Zheng's reward is a bit much. Even you can only stare in wide-eyed shock. You had hoped for a simple divine title, not to be named the Guardian Dragon of Great Qin, tasked with watching over the 9 provinces, anchoring the empire's fate and ensuring its immortality. It feels like he is stacking impossible burdens upon you. You can't help but shake your head with a bitter smile. You thought Zheng would be a reasonable man, but he has trapped you in a web of cosmic debt. Now, your karma with him is so deep it can't be settled anytime soon. Suddenly, a notification chimes. Host has obtained massive blessing power and established deep karma with Qin. The Great Qin National Destiny System has successfully awakened. This system is now bound to the fate of the empire. As Qin grows stronger, you will receive feedback in the form of numerous rewards and power-ups. Conversely, if Qin's destiny is severed, you will suffer a backlash. At best, your path to immortality will be cut off. At worst, your life and soul will vanish. It seems this system intends to tie you permanently to the empire, shattering your dreams of a carefree life. System rewards granted: dragon transformation art and human form technique. You also receive a marrow cleansing pill and a substitute talisman. It is quite a haul, really, but you barely have time to process it before the world changes. The once clear and sunny sky is suddenly swallowed by darkness. Within moments, thick thunderclouds gather, casting a shadow over the entire landscape. Lightning crackles and thunder roars through the heavens like the end of the world. You look up at the gloomy sky, your eyes twitching with a sense of impending doom. This is the legendary lightning tribulation. You can't understand why it's appearing now, especially since the system already absorbed most of the divine energy from the blessing. As you wonder why this is happening, Zheng speaks up, sounding confused as to why the heavenly lightning seems to be targeting him specifically. That is when it clicks. The tribulation isn't for you, it's for the emperor. The reason is simple. Despite his immense aura, Zheng has overstepped his bounds. Granting a divine title is one thing. It might have only cost him a few years of his life or a bit of the empire's luck. But Zheng was far too ambitious. By naming you the Guardian Dragon and tasking you with anchoring the very foundations of the 9 provinces for eternity, he asked for more than a mortal can give. This ridiculous level of blessing has far exceeded Zheng's authority as a human ruler. Now, the lightning has come for the sole purpose of erasing him from existence. You look at Zheng with a deeply complicated expression. Since your fate is now bound to the destiny of Qin, his survival has suddenly become your problem. If Zheng dies, our protagonist's fate is sealed as well. Therefore, the emperor must not only survive, but live a long, prosperous life so that the national destiny of Great Qin remains unbroken. Fortunately, the system isn't entirely heartless. The substitute talisman from the starter pack can take Zheng's place. It can negate the lightning strike entirely. Realizing this, he looks at Zheng and begins his performance, telling the emperor not to worry about this trivial thunder. He tells the emperor to watch as he dispels the tribulation. Putting on a grand show, he chants a fake incantation just as the lightning begins its deadly descent. He activates the talisman, and a deafening roar of thunder echoes across the plains. To be honest, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. Zheng is stunned to see a mere chant dissipate the heavenly wrath. Such divine power convinces him that the ancient legends of requesting a title are true. He believes he has truly bestowed a title upon a god. I am Zheng, first emperor of Qin, he declares, asking if this is indeed the Guardian Dragon. Though his heart is racing with unease, Zheng maintains his imperial dignity and majestic presence. Our protagonist adopts the title of Taoist Beixian. He claims to have cultivated for 1,000 years on Mount Mangdang before descending to find a fated ruler. Today, he accepts the title of Guardian Dragon. He vows to guard the dragon veins and ensure Qin's eternal foundation. As he speaks, he transforms into a human form, clad in elegant black Taoist robes. With a dragon mark between his brows, he exudes an extraordinary immortal aura. He claimed 1,000 years of cultivation, of course, simply to sound more impressive. After all, saying he only had a century of experience would feel a bit cheap. Zheng's eyes light up with a sudden, piercing intensity at this answer. He realizes this man is the white snake from before. So it is immortal Beixian, he says, before asking why the heavenly lightning appeared at all. He explains that the emperor's reward far exceeded his current karmic merit. Heaven sent the lightning to take the emperor's life as payment for such a title. Zheng's pupils shrink and cold sweat breaks out on his forehead. He hadn't realized that his ambition had nearly cost him his very existence. He knows that if he were to fall, Great Qin would instantly collapse into chaos. The hard-won piece of the empire would vanish in a heartbeat. The world would return to the bloody era of warring states, where life is cheap. Yet, this realization only makes Zheng more ecstatic than before. The fact that this immortal easily dispelled the lightning proves that divinity exists. And if gods exist, perhaps he too can achieve eternal life. He asks the immortal if there is a path to immortality, his gaze fixed intensely on our protagonist. Deep down, he is incredibly nervous about the answer. Before today, Zheng had only dreamed of immortality without much hope. His logic told him that immortals were nothing more than myths and legends. He suspected that some form of longevity might exist, and though his body was beginning to weaken, he felt he still had enough time left to find it. But the appearance of our protagonist has completely ignited Zheng's desperate hunger for the secrets of eternal life, a path he is now determined to follow. Seeing the emperor's fervent gaze, the Taoist simply shakes his head. As Zheng's face falls in disappointment, he quickly adds a small, calculated hope. He explains that while he doesn't possess a simple immortality spell, he has heard of a method that, if achieved, could rival eternal life itself. Zheng, whose hope had nearly vanished, is instantly revitalized by these words and bows deeply with the humble etiquette of a devoted student. This method is the Fortune Dynasty, a path where one strengthens the empire by absorbing the essence of other nations. As long as the empire stands, the emperor remains immortal. Eventually, the entire nation would ascend, and every citizen would become like a dragon. However, he warns that this path is fraught with immense difficulty. He notes that reaching such a divine state is as hard as climbing to the heavens, and then he simply watches Zheng in silence. To be honest, he's making most of this up. Our protagonist doesn't actually understand the Fortune Dynasty at all. He only invented the concept because his own rewards are tied to the prosperity of Great Qin. So, he crafted this grand vision to manipulate the first emperor into building a stronger nation. An eternal empire, an immortal ruler. It sounds quite convincing, doesn't it? Zheng has no idea he's being played by a master deceiver. Instead, he is already fantasizing about building an unprecedented, divine version of the Qin dynasty. The emperor declares his wish to name the immortal as the imperial preceptor, inviting him to return to the capital and build this Fortune dynasty together. Even our protagonist is surprised by how easily the emperor was swayed. It seems his performance was even more effective than he had anticipated. Overjoyed, Zheng turns to his loyal general, Meng Yi, who is standing nearby. Meng Yi snaps out of his daze and steps forward to receive the imperial command. The emperor proclaims that during his eastern tour at Mount Mangdang, he met the immortal Beixian and received the secrets of longevity. Thus, he appoints him as imperial preceptor. He decrees that seeing the preceptor is the same as seeing the emperor himself. Zheng is a man of action, and he immediately orders Meng Yi to draft the edict. Meng Yi is shocked by the weight of this announcement. He wonders if such a sudden and massive promotion is truly appropriate for the empire. The title of imperial preceptor itself isn't the problem, as it could just be a symbolic role. The real issue lies in the authority to oversee the entire world. This means the Taoist now holds the same power as Zheng himself, effectively becoming a second emperor of Qin. It is a terrifying level of influence. The surrounding officials, hearing the decree, rush forward to beg the emperor to reconsider. They believe such a move is far too dangerous for the state. The civil and military officials fall to their knees in a wave. They hadn't witnessed the earlier miracles, only hearing Zheng's sudden decree to appoint an imperial preceptor. Naturally, they intend to oppose such a massive grant of power with everything they have. Even our protagonist is surprised by Zheng's sheer boldness in offering such a high position. The emperor's voice turns cold as he reminds Meng Yi that he was summoned to draft the edict, not to debate it. He then turns his sharp gaze toward the rest of the assembly. He asks if they are truly questioning his decision. In this moment, Zheng's regal aura sweeps over them like a physical weight, leaving the officials trembling in fear. As the ruler of the first unified empire, Zheng's word is absolute law. In the Great Qin, there is no room for dissent, and certainly no one capable of standing against him. The officials bow their heads to the ground, not daring to utter another word. The emperor then commands the army to begin the immediate return to the capital, Xianyang. Once the first emperor has made up his mind, the matter is settled. The soldiers begin reorganizing the massive procession, preparing for the long journey back to the city. Zheng turns to the Taoist and claims that since the tour was poorly prepared, the preceptor will have to endure the hardship of sharing the imperial carriage. This is, of course, a complete lie. Finding another carriage would be trivial for an emperor, but he invents this excuse simply to stay close to our protagonist. He wants to further cement their bond, and the Taoist gracefully agrees, stepping into the carriage. To be honest, it's much more comfortable than walking anyway. Watching this, the hearts of the officials sink even further. It is clear that this mysterious newcomer holds a far higher status in the emperor's heart than they imagined. Nearby, Zhao Gao lowers his head, a shadow flickering in his eyes. As the emperor's most favored eunuch, his entire power base relies solely on Ying Zheng's personal affection. The sudden appearance of a rival for the emperor's attention makes him feel a deep sense of danger. Sensing this hidden malice, our protagonist looks back at him. He takes a long, thoughtful look at Zhao Gao, who is currently driving the carriage. To our hero, this man represents a massive bounty, a walking gold mine of rewards. Zhao Gao quickly forces a smile, though internally he is alarmed, sensing that this Taoist is a threat that cannot be allowed to remain. Over the next few days, the two become inseparable. They eat and travel together, a level of intimacy that makes everyone else green with envy. Meanwhile, news of the new imperial preceptor begins to spread across the land. The idea of a stranger holding the power to oversee the entire world sparks intense debate. Various schools of thought and anti-Qin factions begin investigating this mysterious figure. They are desperate to uncover his origins, trying to determine if he is a friend, a foe, or perhaps someone who can be bribed to their side. Their efforts, however, are destined to be in vain. Eventually, the army reaches the banks of the Wei River. Once they cross, they will finally be within the territory of Xianyang. The first emperor calls for the procession to halt and asks the preceptor if he would like to take a walk with him. It seems he isn't quite finished talking just yet. Our protagonist nods, accepting the emperor's invitation. By the banks of the Wei River, the rushing currents surge upward like a water beast stirring up a storm. The sound of the waves fills the air as Ying Zheng and the Taoist walk side by side. For a long time, neither speaks, simply sharing the silence until Ying Zheng finally breaks it. He asks if the preceptor has a way to strengthen the Great Qin. Ever since hearing about the methods of an eternal dynasty, Ying Zheng has been obsessed with the idea. On the surface, having annexed the 6 kingdoms, the empire seems invincible. In reality, however, the interior is still plagued by numerous hidden fractures. The most pressing issues are external, with the Xiongnu and Donghu tribes looming in the north like a constant shadow. Deep down, the emperor carries a burden that few can see. The world calls him a tyrant, claiming his taxes are suffocating. But if he didn't build the Great Wall, the people of the northern border would face endless slaughter. Every year, tens of thousands of commoners die of starvation after their grain is stolen by invaders. To be honest, his choices are far more difficult than they appear. If he were truly heartless, he wouldn't have repeatedly lowered taxes or used the national treasury to aid disaster victims, acts that have left the empire's coffers nearly empty. People assume his annual tours of the empire are merely displays of vanity and grandiosity. They believe he simply enjoys the spectacle of his own power. In truth, it's because anti-Qin factions are growing too large to ignore. With the treasury empty, he cannot easily wage war, so he uses these tours as a psychological deterrent. He moves with such force to keep those treacherous rebels in a state of constant fear. Yet, it seems no one truly understands his grievances or his exhaustion. Solving these problems is the only way to ensure Qin's prosperity, but he is at a complete loss. This walk is partly to clear his mind and partly a test. He wants to see what our protagonist is truly capable of. If the man only understands spiritual cultivation, then Ying Zheng will simply provide for him as a guest. But if he has real solutions, Ying Zheng will treat him with the utmost reverence. Strengthening the empire is both difficult and simple, depending on one's perspective. It boils down to 2 fronts, the internal and the external. Our hero offers to explain, starting with the external threats of the Xiongnu and the Baiwa. The Xiongnu are born to the saddle, moving like the wind. Individually, their combat prowess often exceeds that of a standard Qin soldier. This is precisely why they can raid the borders repeatedly without being eradicated. Ying Zheng is delighted to hear this analysis and asks if there is a solution. The core of the problem is that the Central Plains lack warhorses, while every Xiongnu child is raised on horseback. It's a natural advantage that is hard to overcome. They can charge and retreat with incredible speed. While the elite Qin armies are powerful as a unit, they struggle when it comes to individual, mobile combat. Their capabilities are indeed inferior to the Xiongnu, leaving the army passive against invasions. The Xiongnu avoid head-on battles, choosing instead to split their forces for raids. If you send few men, they are overwhelmed. If you send many, they simply cannot catch the enemy. It is a truly frustrating situation. And so, the dilemma remains. Just as Ying Zheng is about to ask our protagonist for a solution, Zhao Gao interrupts with news that Su Fu has refined a golden elixir of longevity. At the mention of Su Fu and his elixir, Ying Zheng instinctively frowns. In earlier years, Su Fu had gained favor by treating the emperor's chronic headaches. Because of this, he was appointed as the chief alchemist, responsible for refining the emperor's elixirs. Knowing Ying Zheng's obsession with immortality, Su Fu had boldly claimed there were divine mountains across the sea inhabited by immortals who surely possessed the tree of eternal life. Consequently, he was given the resources to search. He even claimed to have found the entrance to these mountains. Though half skeptical, Yingzheng spared his life to continue the work, and now, Su Fu has actually produced a longevity pill. Yingzheng wonders if heaven is finally blessing Qin, first with a preceptor and now with this elixir. This realization leaves Yingzheng visibly moved as he orders Zhao Gao to bring Su Fu forward. A longevity pill? To be honest, it sounds more like a death sentence. Hearing Zhao Gao mention Su Fu and his supposed miracle medicine, our protagonist cannot help but scoff inwardly at the absurdity of it all. As a traveler from the future, he knows better than anyone that Su Fu lacks the skill to create true longevity. This so-called golden elixir is likely nothing more than a common alchemical stone pill made from expensive herbs and heavy metals, processed through dubious methods. When these elements are fused together, they form a toxic concoction. Historical records suggest these formulas often included over 40 different ingredients, categorized into 3 grades. The superior grade was said to allow one to ascend to divinity, yet the components mentioned were almost entirely composed of dangerous heavy metals. These substances possess neurotoxic and hallucinogenic properties, leading the user to believe the medicine is working. It is, in essence, a deadly addiction. This explains why Yingzheng, after consuming these toxins, didn't punish Su Fu, but instead allowed him to lead 3,000 youths out to sea. It all comes down to a simple lack of scientific knowledge. And then, Su Fu arrives, bowing deeply as he greets the emperor. While we watch the emperor reflect, Zhao Gao leads Su Fu into the presence of Yingzheng. Su Fu begins his performance, claiming that thanks to the emperor's great fortune and his own tireless work, refining the mixture for 81 days, he has finally produced a batch of golden elixirs. He wishes the emperor a life as eternal as the heavens and a dynasty that lasts for 10,000 generations. Su Fu is truly a master of the craft of lying. That is, spinning these tall tales without even pausing for breath before presenting the elixir. Yingzheng's expression remains unchanged by the flattery, and he simply signals Zhao Gao to bring the elixir forward. He takes the jade bottle from Zhao Gao's hands and pours out a single golden pill, holding it up to examine it closely. We have to admit, Su Fu certainly has some skill when it comes to appearances. From its outward look, the pill is quite impressive. It carries a faint medicinal fragrance and even glimmers with a subtle golden light under the sun. Not bad at all. It matches the descriptions in the ancient texts perfectly. Yingzheng is visibly satisfied, and a rare smile even begins to grace his face as he considers this a great achievement. Su Fu quickly adds that while this pill can extend one's life, true immortality requires a journey to the divine mountains across the sea. This time, he claims he only needs 3,000 young boys and girls to bring back the secret of eternal life. Seeing that Yingzheng is pleased, Su Fu immediately drops to his knees to beg for permission to set sail. Just as Yingzheng is about to agree, our protagonist speaks up and disrupts the moment. He warns the emperor that the so-called divine mountains are nothing more than a scam. Furthermore, he declares that this elixir won't extend life, but is actually a poisonous pill that will take it. He waited for the right moment to expose the plot. This revelation hits the room like a sudden tidal wave. Su Fu is instantly outraged, shouting, "Insolence! Where did you come from? To dare slander the divine mountains and claim my golden elixir is poison? What audacity!" Su Fu is fuming, and he doesn't bother hiding his anger. He glares at our protagonist as if he wants to swallow him alive. After all, ruining a man's path to wealth is like killing his parents. Yingzheng was clearly about to grant his request. Su Fu's plan was to take this opportunity to swindle the emperor, take the 3,000 youths and the massive funding, and flee to a distant island. There, he would become a local king, and by the time Yingzheng realized he'd been cheated, he would be far beyond the emperor's reach. This was Su Fu's meticulously crafted plan that he had been building since his last return, with this elixir as the key. Now that his success was within reach, he is naturally beyond furious. Zhao Gao, seeing an opening, chimes in, suggesting that the preceptor's words are inappropriate and that he should apologize to the emperor and Master Su immediately. Zhao Gao is secretly delighted, thinking our protagonist is being foolish by openly slandering the divine mountains and the emperor's precious elixir at such a moment. Yingzheng also frowns, looking toward the preceptor. He doesn't quite understand why he would make such a bold and shocking claim. To be honest, the reason Yingzheng trusts Su Fu so much is actually because of our protagonist. Your arrival made him believe that immortals truly exist. Because of that, he assumed Su Fu's claims about divine mountains were real and was ready to agree. But then, you suddenly declare the mountains are a lie and the elixir is poison. Yingzheng is utterly bewildered. You explain that Su Fu's words are all complete fabrications. Those divine mountains are just ordinary islands inhabited by primitive people living in caves, not immortals. As for this golden elixir, its true name is the metalstone pill. It is made mostly of toxic heavy metals that cause hallucinations, making people mistake the effects for divine power. In reality, it is a slow-acting poison. Hearing this, Yingzheng's expression turns dangerously dark. Su Fu, give me an explanation. Yingzheng roars like an angry lion, his royal majesty radiating through the room. Su Fu cries out, that this is a clear case of slander and a deliberate attempt to frame him. Deep down, Su Fu is panicked. He didn't expect you to know alchemy, or to identify the metal stone pill so easily. However, he isn't about to confess. He begins a new performance, knowing the pill's toxicity is subtle. It would be nearly impossible to prove it's poisonous on the spot. He tells the emperor that these elixirs have been recorded in ancient texts for ages, so how could they be poison? Besides, he notes that Lord Zhao Gao always tests the pills first. He argues that if they were truly toxic, he would never dare present them. He claims you are simply jealous and acting out of spite. I beg your majesty to see the truth. Su Fu's explanation is quite logical, and we see no obvious flaws in his desperate defense. Zhao Gao realizes that even if he survives this, he'll lose a layer of skin. He shoots a resentful look at both Su Fu and our protagonist, hating how this mess has been pushed onto him. Ying Zheng finds himself in a difficult position, unable to tell who is telling the truth. Seeing the emperor hesitate, Su Fu gives you a smug, provocative look. It's the kind of punchable face that says, "So what if you saw through me? Try and stop me." You ignore his taunts, stating that the truth can be seen in an instant. Using the qi you've cultivated, you manifest a fish and create a small pool of water. Your Majesty, you say, this is a fresh, living fish. If we place a pill in its mouth, the toxicity will be clear. Ying Zheng agrees and personally drops a golden elixir into the fish's mouth. In just a few moments, the once calm fish begins to thrash its tail violently, struggling as the poison takes hold. The fish floats to the surface, stiff and lifeless. It is clearly as dead as can be. Guards, the emperor shouts, seize this traitor Su Fu immediately. He orders the Black Guard to investigate everyone connected to Su Fu and throw them into the death cells. Watching this unfold, Ying Zheng realizes the truth. These golden elixirs weren't for longevity at all. They were soul-snatching poison. At this moment, Ying Zheng's fury is uncontainable as he commands a full investigation. When an emperor is this angry, millions tremble. We can easily imagine that many heads will roll today. Seeing the grim situation, Su Fu begs for mercy. He claims he only followed ancient texts to refine the pills and had no idea they were toxic. He isn't smiling anymore. His once ruddy face has turned as pale as a sheet of paper. However, Ying Zheng ignores his pleas. A group of Qin soldiers drags him away to face the most brutal tortures imaginable. Your Majesty, I deserve 10,000 deaths. Zhao Gao cries out, looking as if he's been struck by lightning. He drops to his knees without hesitation, truly shocked that the pills were poisonous. He was only responsible for testing them, and the eunuchs who tried them are still perfectly healthy and gave glowing reviews. That was the only reason he dared present them. Who could have guessed they were a slow-acting poison? Zhao Gao feels utterly miserable, cursing Su Fu's entire ancestry in his heart. It's a classic case of being caught in the crossfire. Looking at him shivering on the floor, you can't help but chuckle inwardly. This old fox never dreamed he would sink so spectacularly here. Ying Zheng, meanwhile, stares at Zhao Gao with unmasked murderous intent. He realizes that if he hadn't met our protagonist, he might have swallowed that poison himself. Thinking of this, Ying Zheng glances back at the fish in the pool. Seeing its white belly floating there, his eyes twitch with a lingering sense of dread. Everything is thanks to the Imperial Preceptor. Otherwise, that dead fish would have been his own future. You suggest, Your Majesty Zhao Gao is your closest eunuch, in charge of your entire daily life. Yet he made such a catastrophic mistake. Perhaps it would be best to just execute him as well. This single sentence sends a chill straight down Zhao Gao's spine. He never expected you to be so ruthless as to want him dead too. Of course, if their positions were reversed, Zhao Gao would likely be even more heartless. The portly Zhao Gao doesn't dare argue. He simply kowtows repeatedly, hoping to gain Ying Zheng's sympathy and earn a shred of mercy. Enough. This matter does not concern you. Withdraw. Ying Zheng looks at him deeply, ultimately deciding not to kill him, as Zhao Gao was also deceived. Zhao Gao is truly innocent in this specific matter, having been caught in a disaster he didn't seek. Besides, the emperor has used him for many years, and despite his flaws, he is sufficiently obedient and useful, which is enough for now. Thank you, Your Majesty, Zhao Gao says with a trembling voice as he stands up. His forehead is already covered in bruises and streaks of blood, yet he doesn't dare wipe the wounds, choosing instead to withdraw with extreme caution. He knows that although Ying Zheng said nothing more, a seed of doubt has been planted in the emperor's heart. His favored status will likely never be the same, and even his position as the prefect of the palace stables is now in jeopardy. Once he finally leaves the area, Zhao Gao clenches his fists, his eyes filled with a venomous resentment. Meanwhile, the news that Su Fu's golden elixirs were poisonous has sent the emperor into a towering rage. He immediately orders a thorough investigation of all alchemists in Xianyang, a move that sends shockwaves through the city. Ever since Su Fu supposedly cured the emperor's chronic headaches and gained his favor, the practice of alchemy had flourished throughout the land. As we often see, when the ruler leads, the people follow. This led to alchemists gathering in Xianyang from everywhere, with many officials forming close ties to them just to stay informed about the emperor's whims. Now, knowing Ying Zheng is purging the alchemists, these officials fear they will be dragged down by association. On the other Side of the palace. Emperor Yingzheng's expression remains grim. He never imagined such a traitor was hiding right beside him, especially one he trusted so deeply. Having consumed many of Su Fu's pills previously, he realizes with horror that his body must be riddled with toxins. Your Majesty, this is a marrow-cleansing pill. You explain that it has the power to cleanse the marrow, invigorate the blood, and expel all poisons from the system. It can effectively flush out the toxins within him. With a bit of reluctance, you pull out the pill. This was a reward from the system, and it is certainly no ordinary item. If you weren't worried that Yingzheng's early death might cause the Qin dynasty's fate to collapse, you wouldn't be so willing to part with it. A marrow-cleansing pill, Yingzheng asks, still feeling a lingering fear of medicine, but seeing your obvious pain at giving it up. He remembers you are the guardian dragon of Qin. You would never harm him. Thus, Yingzheng takes the pill from your hand. As they say, without comparison, there is no way to see the truth. Su Fu's pills only had a faint scent and a dull golden luster, but this marrow-cleansing pill is crystal clear and radiates an incredibly rich medicinal fragrance. Even more miraculous is that under the sunlight, one can see the legendary pill veins flowing within it. We transition now to the following scene. Yingzheng looks around, asking the servants why they've arrived and where the imperial preceptor has gone. They explain that the preceptor has already returned to the carriage palace. He had instructed them to help the emperor wash and change his clothes. It is only then that Yingzheng realizes his skin is covered in a sticky, dark substance. This foul-smelling sludge is exactly what the preceptor described, the toxins finally leaving his body. Relieved, he hurries them to clean him. Meanwhile, back at the carriage palace, the preceptor is silently circulating his dragon transformation art, passing the time with his cultivation. A system notification chimes, congratulating him for aiding the emperor. And here, we take a brief moment to remind you to like and subscribe if the journey continues. Your support through likes and subscriptions truly helps us bring more of these tales to life. It really does make a difference. We appreciate you being part of this journey with us as we follow the fate of the Qin dynasty. Stay tuned for more. Every bit of support helps the channel grow and allows us to continue the narration. We thank you for your presence. Don't forget to join us for the next chapter of this epic tale. Your engagement is what keeps the story moving forward. We are grateful for every subscriber who follows along with our narration. It is a pleasure to share these stories with you. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. We look forward to seeing you in the next part of the legend. Thank you for watching and for your continued support of the channel. We continue our journey with Mingjing, a clear mirror reflecting the past. As we move forward, Mingjing truly needs your support. We welcome you to subscribe to Mingjing and join our community. Because, to be honest, Mingjing needs you. It is your support that keeps us going. We warmly welcome you to subscribe. Here at Mingjing needs you. Your support is vital, and we welcome you to subscribe to Mingjing. Mingjing truly needs you. Your support, so please subscribe to Mingjing. Mingjing needs your support, and we welcome you to subscribe. After all, Mingjing needs your support, so welcome to Mingjing. We need your help and welcome you to subscribe. Subscribe to Mingjing, for we truly need your support. Welcome to Mingjing. We need your support as we look forward to a new era together. For he and the fate of the great Qin are now bound together, sharing in every glory and every defeat. Naturally, he hoped Great Qin would conquer the world until everyone spoke the Qin language. Excellent. Yingzheng laughed, his dragon robe fluttering as a sudden wind filled the carriage. The battle for Nanyue had been a heavy loss, but that was merely due to the terrain. If they could only connect the Xiang and Li rivers to the north, they could secure the army's supplies and take Nanyue in a single stroke. Yet, the empire's internal struggles remained the most pressing issue. As the saying goes, one must stabilize the interior before facing the outside. Beneath Great Qin's calm surface, we see a foundation already riddled with 1,000 wounds. This decay was the main reason the elites of the 6 conquered nations refused to submit. Does the imperial preceptor also believe Qin law is too harsh? Do you want me to implement the old ways and grant fiefs to the fallen nobles? Yingzheng let out a bitter smile. To be honest, the severity of Qin law had always been criticized. Scholars like Chun Yu and even his eldest son, Fusu, were constantly urging him to soften his rule. But these laws were the very bedrock of the state, not something easily changed. If he reverted to the old ways, how would he handle the various schools of thought and the anti-Qin factions? Should he truly do as they suggested and follow the Zhou dynasty's example? By once again granting land to the nobles of the 6 nations to win over their people? Yingzheng narrowed his eyes. It wasn't that he hadn't tried to win them over before. He had repeatedly reduced taxes and labor burdens to appease the masses, but the results, unfortunately, had been quite poor. He hadn't achieved his goal at all. Then, how does the imperial preceptor believe the law should change to win their hearts? This, of course, touched upon complex matters of state. Such things cannot be explained overnight and require careful thought. You gave Yingzheng a look. He clearly wanted to empty out every bit of knowledge you possessed in one go. Haha, so, does the imperial preceptor believe this division of land is feasible? Realizing he was asking too much, Yingzheng quickly steered the conversation back to the fiefs. This had long been a source of anxiety for him, and he wanted to know your perspective. Tell me, is granting land to the 6 nations Feasible. It is, you replied. In fact, one could say the feudal system is YYDS. YYDS? What does that mean? Does the preceptor truly agree with re-establishing the Six Nations? Ing Zheng's expression turned dark and grim. Though he didn't understand your slang, he could sense that you supported the old system. For Ing Zheng, this was hardly good news. In his eyes, the feudal system was the greatest flaw of the Zhou dynasty, and he feared its return. It was precisely this flaw that led to the era of the Seven Warring States. Your Majesty, you suggest, you must look further ahead and think on a much grander scale. Observing Ing Zheng's grim expression, you decide not to tease him further and explain directly. This world, after all, consists of far more than just this single piece of land. Since they desire fiefs and the restoration of the Six Nations, why not grant them lands elsewhere? For instance, the overseas immortal mountains Su Fu dreams of, or the barren lands east of Donghu. Even the so-called Pure Land in the far west could be granted as fiefs to the nobles of the Six Nations. Your Majesty could even go so far as to provide them with old armor, funds, and grain to help them reach their respective territories. Doing so would demonstrate your imperial magnanimity and win over the hearts of the people. It would silence those with malicious intent and effectively drive the old nobility out of Great Qin. Most importantly, it would ensure the empire's internal stability. They would essentially be laying the foundation for you. Once Great Qin is fully stabilized, you could simply find a pretext to launch a campaign and easily reclaim those lands. We know, of course, the inherent flaws of the feudal system, but those issues only applied within the context of the Seven Kingdoms. What if Great Qin expanded 10 or even 100 times over? In that case, the feudal system might actually be a viable choice. After all, conquering overseas territories or the distant west in a short time, such as the Maurya, Seleucid, or Persian empires, is simply unrealistic. Rather than fighting them yourself, it is better to do these nobles a favor and grant them those distant lands. As for whether they can actually defeat those foreign kingdoms, well, that would depend entirely on their own strength. I see. With the imperial preceptor by my side, what reason have I to fear these petty anti-Qin factions? Ing Zheng, being remarkably sharp, immediately understands your plan. He realizes exactly what you mean by restoring the Six Nations. This is clearly a trap laid for the old nobility, forcing them to walk into it of their own volition. It is a masterstroke of open strategy with no possible counter. Scholars use words to disrupt the law, and warriors use force to break prohibitions. Ing Zheng notes, citing the various schools. Among the 100 schools of thought, the Confucians, Mahists, Taoists, strategists, Mahists, Yin-Yang, and diplomats are the most prominent. This has always been my greatest headache. Please, Imperial Preceptor, enlighten me. Ing Zheng bows deeply, lowering his posture to the absolute minimum. This was a rare sight indeed. Since unifying the world, this was the first time he had sought guidance with such humility. If anyone else had witnessed this, they would have been utterly shocked. This is the Emperor, after all. He was known for being forceful and dominant. The idea of ending the independent lineages of the 100 schools to claim their talents for the state was a perspective Ing Zheng had never heard before. He falls into deep thought. Does the preceptor mean that I should follow the example of Li Si and Chun Yu and summon the talents of all schools to serve as court officials? We see that Great Qin's left chancellor, Li Si, was originally a student of Confucianism before turning to legalism and finally entering the Qin court as an official. Then there is Chun Yu, a great scholar of the Qin who also hails from the Confucian school. His seniority actually exceeds that of Li Si, giving him immense prestige among scholars. Ing Zheng considers your words carefully. He assumes you are suggesting he used Li Si and Chun Yu as templates to recruit all the talents of the 100 schools into the government. But that is not it at all. You explain that Li Si and Chun Yu are unique cases driven by personal ambition, which lacks universal applicability. You shake your head, dismissing his idea. You continue, explaining that your intent is to cut off the independent lineages of the 100 schools at the very root. For example, imagine if Great Qin established academies in every county. Imagine a world where Great Qin promises that any child reaching the age of 8 can enter these academies for free. To be honest, it sounds almost too good to be true. The curriculum would consist entirely of official Great Qin texts, and by the age of 12, every student would undergo a unified national examination. He spoke with great confidence, laying out a modern academy system from the future, though, for now, it was merely a grand blueprint to be realized later. When the time comes to implement it, adjustments must be made based on the current realities of Great Qin. After all, every era has its own inherent limitations. You cannot simply force a modern system onto the past. You explain that this method provides a channel for those of humble birth and all talents to rise through the ranks. As you speak, Ing Zheng's eyes seem to contain 10,000 stars, shimmering with a moving light. He is, after all, the first emperor to unify the world. He is a man of vision, a true sovereign of the ages. We know this system took thousands of years and many sages to refine into its final form. Yet, despite the limitations of his own era, Ing Zheng is different. The moment you reveal the secret, he immediately grasps 70% of its profound implications. It truly shows just how formidable the first emperor really is. He remarks that a single conversation with you is worth 10 years of study. However, he notes that expanding these academies nationwide will require immense time and energy. And there is a more critical issue: the Confucians. They hold a dominant position in the hearts of all educated men, and they are not exactly your biggest fans. The Confucians are deeply dissatisfied with the unification of script and measurements, believing the emperor is destroying the cultural heritage of the 6 nations. They refuse to serve him. Zheng frowns as he thinks of the troublesome Confucians. You simply smile and tell him not to worry. You will handle the Confucian school yourself. With total confidence, you accept the task, and Zheng is now completely won over. From this moment on, he treats you with the formal etiquette of a devoted disciple. Meanwhile, the golden elixirs refined by Su Fu are revealed to be poisonous, sending the emperor into a rage. He immediately orders the Black Ice platform to investigate. The investigation into the alchemists begins in Xianyang. Suddenly, the entire city is on edge, and we see the scholar Chun Yu pacing restlessly as tension grips every corner. A group of Confucian scholars has gathered, their faces etched with panic and unease. They curse Su Fu as a fool for daring to present poisonous elixirs to the emperor. The emperor's fury has extended to all alchemists, and he has ordered a thorough investigation. If they cannot stop the Black Ice platform, the consequences will be dire. One scholar, his expression a mask of anxiety, frets that they will all be implicated. To be honest, his fear is quite justified given the emperor's current mood. The room falls into a heavy, suffocating silence as the weight of their situation sinks in. Among them, the scholars Ho Sheng and Lu Sheng were the leaders of their faction. They had stayed close to Su Fu to study alchemy, gaining the emperor's trust. In the shadows, they had helped the group immensely, forging deep ties with everyone present. But now, that connection has become a deadly liability. With both men now arrested, no one knows if they were truly part of Su Fu's scheme. If they were, then every person in this room is effectively a dead man walking. In their frantic state, they seem to have forgotten all the dignified teachings of Confucius. It is a rather unseemly sight for such esteemed men of letters. At that moment, the great scholar Chun Yu enters. Seeing them so utterly lost and terrified, he immediately begins to berate them for their lack of composure. The moment Chun Yu appears, the scholars look to him as their savior. Some look at him with pitiful eyes, while others even begin to sob quietly in relief. He snaps at them, telling them they are supposed to be men of character. He asks how they expect to achieve greatness if they cry over such a small matter. The sound of weeping clearly irritates Chun Yu. He reminds them that they had no part in the actual refining of the poisonous pills. Even if they are associated with Ho Sheng and Lu Sheng, it is merely a matter of scholarly friendship. He tells them to go home and focus on their studies. He promises he will personally go to discuss the matter with Prince Fu Su. Relieved, the scholars thank him for his intervention and take their leave. Having calmed the crowd, Chun Yu heads straight for Fu Su's estate to plan their next move. Similar scenes are playing out all across the city of Xianyang. Every official knows that this is no small affair. Throughout the capital, masters are questioning everyone within their own households to ensure their safety. The atmosphere is thick with suspicion as the investigation reaches into the very heart of the government. Meanwhile, Zheng returns to his study to receive an update on the Su Fu case. His officers report that under interrogation, Su Fu has started naming names. The commander of the Black Ice platform, Dun Ruo, reveals that those involved include Ho Sheng, Lu Sheng, Meng Qi, and Wu Jing. The net is closing in. The list of those involved in the case is presented to Zheng. According to the confessions of Lu Sheng and Ho Sheng, the conspiracy reaches even further than expected. It seems a total of 460 scholars and officials are implicated. Zheng raises an eyebrow, asking to see the written confessions immediately, a gesture that bodes ill for many. He hadn't expected so many people to be involved. As he reads through the testimonies, his anger only intensifies. It turns out these men had been quite busy insulting him behind his back. To be honest, their boldness was nothing short of suicidal. He orders that by noon tomorrow, Su Fu is to be executed by dismemberment at the city gates. As for the rest of the conspirators, they are to be buried alive as a warning to all. A suffocating, murderous aura begins to radiate from the emperor, filling the entire room. Dun Ruo, the commander of the Black Ice platform, feels an instinctive shiver run down his spine. He quickly takes his orders and departs to carry out the grim task. To the northeast, we find one of the palaces closest to Zheng, a place where carved dragons and painted scenes radiate the full, majestic essence of imperial power. Inside this majestic hall, we find our protagonist sitting cross-legged, practicing the art of the painting dragon. His divine powers might have been borrowed by that troublesome system, but he has still received the recognition of heaven and earth. His natural talent is now at its peak, and this cultivation technique fits him perfectly, like a glove, one might say. In just a few short days, he has transitioned from a mere mortal to a level 3 chi refiner. Suddenly, a group of palace maids enters, offering to help the imperial preceptor wash up. These beautiful young women bow and speak in soft, gentle voices. All the while, they steal curious glances at him, their eyes filled with a mix of wonder and interest. They are naturally curious. After all, even the emperor's grown sons must live outside the palace. Yet this man has been personally invited by Zheng to stay within these walls. They have heard the rumors that he has been officially titled the imperial preceptor. Every word and gesture from the emperor suggests that this man holds his absolute trust and favor. But for the maids, the most important detail is how young he looks. He appears to have only recently reached adulthood, yet he carries himself with an air of profound mystery. In their eyes, he is even more handsome and elegant than Prince Fusu. They can't help but think that if they could only catch his eye, their lives would change forever. It would be like a crow turning into a phoenix overnight. As their gazes grow increasingly heated, one can't help but feel that a man in his position really ought to be careful. He is well aware of what they are thinking, but he tells himself that such distractions would only slow down his progress. At least, not until he moves past his current stage of cultivation. He is determined to maintain his discipline for now. Surrounded by the attentive and somewhat lingering service of the maids, he finishes his morning preparations. After a brief moment of reflection, he prepares for the day ahead. Normally, the emperor should be heading to the Kirin Hall for the morning court assembly. However, he is coming here instead, leaving everyone to wonder what he needs from our preceptor. You may rise, Zheng says, nodding dismissively before turning his full attention to our protagonist. Imperial preceptor, did you sleep well? Is there anything here not to your liking? The fact that the emperor's first words are a personal inquiry, delivered with an unprecedented gentleness, confirms everyone's suspicions. It seems Zheng's priorities have shifted significantly. Instead of heading to the morning court, he came straight to the Qingtian Palace. This level of concern for the preceptor's daily comfort shows just how much he respects him. To be honest, the onlookers are utterly stunned by this display of imperial favor. They have never seen the emperor act quite like this before. The head attendant, Tai Jian, trembles with regret, fearing the emperor might be angry that the service wasn't perfect. If he had known the preceptor was this important, things would be different. He tells himself he should have ignored the preceptor's modest requests and sent the most beautiful maids in the palace to serve him. It matters not, Zheng remarks calmly. The preceptor is an immortal who has attained the Tao. Why would he care for mere physical beauty? Zheng doesn't blame the staff. He simply finds the preceptor's lack of interest natural. In the emperor's eyes, this man is a divine dragon, a true immortal who wouldn't be swayed by common charms. Is the preceptor not awake yet? He asks. I shall wake him at once, the old servant replies. The servant hurries off, desperate to rectify the situation before the emperor loses his patience. The crowd's hearts race as their awe for the imperial preceptor reaches a new peak. This is treatment without precedent. Even the emperor's favorite son, Huang, wouldn't dare keep him waiting. Your Majesty, it is nearly the hour of the rabbit, Zhao Gao whispers, noting that the ministers have been waiting outside the palace gates for quite some time now. He suggests that the emperor should perhaps head to the Kirin Hall first while he stays behind to wait for the preceptor. It is a subtle, almost jealous attempt to move things along. Zhao Gao, are you telling me how to conduct my affairs? Zheng's voice is suddenly as cold as ice. The sound of knees hitting the floor follows immediately as Zhao Gao collapses in terror. This servant deserves death, Zhao Gao cries, pressing his forehead to the ground. Zheng gives him one chilling look and says nothing more, leaving the official shivering in the silence. Without an order to rise, Zhao Gao remains prostrate, his resentment toward our protagonist growing by the second. To be perfectly honest, his grudge has now surpassed his hatred for the Ming brothers. The preceptor has officially become his #1 enemy. Meanwhile, outside the Kirin Hall and Xianyang Palace, the hour of the assembly has already passed. The civil and military officials are all gathered, their faces masked with confusion. According to every precedent, Zheng has never once been late for a court session. In fact, he is usually there before any of them, a truly diligent ruler. But today, for no apparent reason, the emperor is nowhere to be found. How strange, the officials whisper. Why hasn't His Majesty arrived? Could it be that the long journey from the east has finally exhausted him, and he is still resting? That doesn't seem right, another counters. He has returned from imperial tours before and never missed a morning. Something is different this time. The officials exchange worried glances. The officials continue their low-voiced discussions, deeply confused by Zheng's delay. Feng Quji, you are the head of the officials. If His Majesty hasn't appeared, could it be that he has fallen ill? Someone approaches the Right Chancellor, Feng Quji, to inquire about the emperor's condition. We should note that Feng Quji holds a position of great weight. After Zheng abolished the single post of Prime Minister, the roles of Left and Right Chancellor were created to share the burden, with the Right Chancellor technically outranking the Left. This old man isn't quite sure either, Feng Quji replies smoothly. Chancellor Li Si traveled with His Majesty. Perhaps he knows the reason. To be honest, he is quite good at deflecting. He shakes his head and tosses the metaphorical ball straight to Li Si. In an instant, every eye in the hall turns toward the Left Chancellor, waiting for an answer he might not have. That old fox, Li Si thinks, shooting a glance at the composed Feng Qiji while cursing him silently. In Great Qin, two families stand above all others in terms of prestige. One is the military lineage of Wang Jian and Wang Bin, and the other is the civil lineage of Feng Qiji and Feng Jie. Since the world was unified, the power dynamics have shifted. Knowing his achievements might threaten the throne, Wang Jian voluntarily retired and handed over his military power. Feng Qiji followed suit, acting somewhat foolish to appear harmless. He plays the role of a transparent man to reduce any perceived threat to the emperor. Consequently, while Feng Qiji is the right chancellor, most actual affairs fall to Li Si. Everyone, please be patient. I shall go and inquire about the situation, Li Si says, pulling back his gaze and nodding to the gathered civil and military officials. He quickly finds an attendant and sends him to investigate. It doesn't take long for the news of Ing Zheng's whereabouts to make its way back to the waiting crowd. When they learn that Ing Zheng went to the Chengtian Palace early this morning just to wait for the Imperial Preceptor to wake up, the assembly practically explodes with shock. The Imperial Preceptor? Where did this fellow come from, daring to let His Majesty wait on his sleep? Some, who are clearly behind on the latest news, cannot contain their outrage. Not knowing the Preceptor's divine origins, they find the entire situation utterly absurd. Preposterous, one official shouts, unable to fathom such a breach of protocol. Meanwhile, our protagonist finally stirs, calling for the maids to help him wash and dress. Though he maintains his immortal discipline, he sees no reason not to enjoy a comfortable life. After all, a little aesthetic beauty is good for the soul. Imperial Preceptor, you are finally awake. His Majesty has been waiting for a long time, a maid says as she hurries in. The maids are visibly trembling, with beads of sweat forming on their foreheads. While our protagonist's status is high enough to ignore the Emperor's schedule, they are not so lucky. They are merely humble servants caught in the middle. Knowing the Emperor skipped the morning court just to wait for a man to wake up has put them under unimaginable pressure. Who could truly know the stress they felt? Fortunately, he didn't sleep the entire day, or their nerves might have snapped completely. You say His Majesty is waiting? For how long? He asks, sounding genuinely surprised. It seems even he didn't expect the first Emperor of Qin to be quite this patient. Learning that the Emperor has been waiting for an hour, our protagonist is genuinely surprised. He quickly washes up and prepares to meet Ing Zheng without further delay. Imperial Preceptor, did you sleep well? Before he can even speak, Ing Zheng approaches him with a warm smile, showing no trace of annoyance at the long wait. Compared to his previous surroundings, last night was indeed very comfortable. I have kept your Majesty waiting, he replies, noticing the Emperor's sincere and concerned gaze. The Emperor's words are filled with genuine care, which he finds quite pleasant. After all, hearts are made of flesh. Regardless of Ing Zheng's ultimate motives, the respect shown here is real. This level of high regard and deep affection from the ruler of Qin is something quite extraordinary. It is a rare display of favor that would make anyone pause. Ing Zheng then smiles and leads the way toward the Kirin Hall, leaving a group of eunuchs and maids standing there, completely frozen in shock. This is the first Emperor of Qin, the man who unified the Seven Kingdoms, yet he personally invited a guest to share his imperial carriage, and even let him board first. To be honest, this doesn't fit Ing Zheng's usual persona at all. Outside the Kirin Hall, the civil and military officials have been waiting for over an hour, and many are visibly displeased. They wonder why an outsider with no known achievements has the right to make them wait. And the reason, that he was simply sleeping, is almost too much to bear. This single act of tardiness has caused more than half the officials to feel a deep sense of resentment toward this new Imperial Preceptor. Yes, first impressions are everything. Hostility begins to brew in the shadows. Meanwhile, Zhao Gao arrives at the hall ahead of the party and officially opens the massive doors of the Kirin Hall. The officials immediately straighten their expressions and file in. Welcome, Your Majesty, they shout in unison as they take their designated positions, while Zhao Gao announces the arrival. A moment later, Ing Zheng and our protagonist enter side by side. The officials are stunned. Who is this man daring to walk shoulder to shoulder with the Emperor? They realize this must be the Imperial Preceptor, but he looks incredibly young. Some dismiss him as a mere boy who must have used some sort of sorcery to bewitch the Emperor. As the officials' minds race with suspicion, Ing Zheng leads our protagonist directly up the 9 levels of the high platform to the very pinnacle of power. Someone, bring a desk for the Imperial Preceptor and place it right next to mine, Ing Zheng commands, ignoring the collective gasps of the crowd. He pays no mind to their bewildered stares, ordering the eunuchs to set the table so that the preceptor can sit as his equal, which, naturally, is a massive breach of tradition. The officials begin to imagine all sorts of wild scenarios to explain this. Zhao Gao, meanwhile, keeps his head low and hides his trembling hands inside his sleeves. He is gritting his teeth in silent fury. He never expected Ing Zheng to value this newcomer so highly in such a short time. Intense jealousy is beginning to warp his composure. We see the high-ranking officials, from Li Si and Feng Jie to Meng Yi and Nei Shitong, all sizing our protagonist up, though they are wise enough to keep their mouths shut. They chose silence because they know exactly what kind of man Ing Zheng is: dominant, overbearing, and a ruler whose word is absolute law. He is a man of profound depth and wisdom. This is the man who suppressed 7 kingdoms by his will alone. Yet here he is, placing a newcomer in such a vital position. And this morning, he even went further. He arrived nearly an hour late just to avoid disturbing our protagonist's sleep. It's clear that in the emperor's heart, this young man is incredibly important, perhaps even an equal. The first emperor is sending a very loud signal. And since these officials are all clever foxes, they aren't about to go looking for trouble by challenging him directly. After all, anyone held in such high regard by the emperor must possess extraordinary talent. To offend such a person before knowing their true strength would be a poor choice. Besides, they have the stubborn Chunyu to lead the charge while they sit back and watch. To be honest, it's a much safer way to play the game. Chunyu was just about to demand who this man was and what right he had to sit as an equal to the emperor when someone else beat him to it. Standing before the civil and military officials, Prince Huang steps forward to question our protagonist directly. Suddenly, every eye in the hall is fixed on the scene. Huang is Ying Zheng's 18th son and his most pampered child. No one expected that before the scholars could speak, the young prince would jump out first. This is the famous Huang, the man destined to become the second emperor of Qin. The tension in the room is thick enough to cut with a sword. Zhao Gao looks up and desperately tries to signal Huang with his eyes. He's thinking, "You fool, can't you see even I am staying quiet? Why are you sticking your neck out now?" Before Ying Zheng can even scold his son, our protagonist speaks up, calmly asking the prince what kind of person he believes is worthy of sitting beside the emperor. There is a hint of amusement in his eyes as he waits for the answer. Huang snaps back that no one in the world has the right to sit as an equal to his father. Huang isn't completely beyond help. He holds a deep, genuine admiration for his father. He gestures to the officials, noting that every man in this hall has earned his place. They have performed great deeds and shed blood for the Qin Empire to earn their seats. But you, he says, are young and have achieved nothing. What right do you have to sit there? We have to admit, Huang has a bit of cleverness in him. His argument is logical and well-founded, making it difficult for anyone to find a flaw in his reasoning. By framing it this way, he isolates our protagonist and pulls the entire court onto his side, using their collective pride to apply pressure. Having finished, Huang looks on triumphantly. He seems to believe he has already won the day. Even Zhao Gao looks up in surprise, impressed by the unexpected wit his young pupil is displaying. These words weren't exactly part of the lesson plan, but the way Huang spoke today was truly eye-opening. To be honest, it was quite the impressive display of unexpected wit. Even Li Si and Meng Yi were taken aback, never imagining that the usually playful and stubborn Huang could produce such a logical argument. At the same time, they all turned their gaze toward our protagonist, curious to see how he would handle the prince's interrogation. In an instant, he became the center of attention. Ying Zheng was about to speak, to explain on his behalf, but our protagonist declined the help. After all, why let someone else take the credit for a perfect moment of showmanship? He noted that while the great Qin exists because of the emperor, he himself can grant the emperor eternal life and ensure the empire never fades. He calmly asked if that was enough to earn his seat. Naturally, the room erupted in cries of absurd and arrogant. Hearing such bold claims, many officials lost their composure and began to criticize him. They told him he had quite the nerve to make such an outrageous boast. Huang was delighted, declaring that if the man couldn't prove it today, he would execute this pretender on his father's behalf. Deep down, the prince thought the man was simply seeking death. He couldn't believe anyone would be foolish enough to claim they possessed the arts of immortality. Our protagonist simply told them to keep their eyes wide open and watch closely. Because, as he put it, this next move was going to be very impressive. As the light dissipated, we see our protagonist surrounded by a golden bell, looking like a divine figure walking among mortals. The sight was absolutely dazzling. How is this possible? They wondered. The visual impact of this inconceivable scene was so great that it immediately sent a shockwave of disbelief through the civil and military officials. Huang's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He rubbed them over and over, unable to believe what was happening right in front of him. It was a perfectly ordinary reaction to the extraordinary, really. In his panic, the prince actually tripped over his own feet and fell flat on his backside, completely dazed. Seeing him in such a pathetic state, the officials couldn't help but sneer inwardly. It seemed Huang was still the same old Huang, perhaps capable of a brief flash of cleverness, but ultimately lacking true substance. Ying Zheng hadn't said a word the entire time, but seeing Huang lose his composure and fall into such a mess over a simple display, the emperor felt a deep sense of dissatisfaction. When the already flustered Huang caught his father's undisguised look of disappointment, his youthful face turned as pale as a sheet of paper. He looked utterly soul-crushed. Suddenly, a voice called the display a laughable folk trick that might fool others, but not a scholar. Seeing that Huang was useless, the stubborn Chunyu launched his own attack, immediately dismissing the golden bell shield as nothing more than a common illusion. He insisted it was a fake and refused to believe his eyes. Sensing the intense hostility coming from this man, our protagonist could already guess his identity. This was Chunyu, one of the 9 ministers of Qin, a chief scholar, and the teacher of the eldest prince, Fu Su, and he was far from finished. Chunyu, a chief scholar of the Great Qin's imperial library, stood tall and puffed out his chest, proudly announcing his full name and title to the room. Chunyu? Never heard of you, our protagonist replied, purposely drawing out the words. Just as the scholar was basking in his own self-importance, the tone shifted. Where did a nobody like you come from, daring to question me? Insolence, the old man barked. He reminded everyone he was one of the 9 ministers and a high-ranking scholar. He was the mentor to the eldest prince, Fu Su. How dare you openly mock me? Chunyu stared him down, his face wrinkling into a grimace of pure rage. If looks could kill, our protagonist would have died 100 times over by now. But then, a voice boomed. The only ones being insolent here are you lot. It was the emperor, the ruler of all under heaven. He asked if they truly thought he had grown so old and senile that he couldn't tell truth from lies, or if they felt the need to question the imperial preceptor's abilities on his behalf. Ing Zhang's roar echoed through the hall until his was the only voice left. I am now announcing to you all, he shall be the imperial preceptor of Qin, to guard our empire's eternal prosperity. Any further objectors will be executed. Using his absolute authority, Ing Zheng ended the confrontation with Chunyu. A tangible killing intent filled every corner of the palace, making everyone present feel as if they had fallen into a pit of ice. Not bad, old Zheng, our protagonist thought, giving the domineering emperor a mental thumbs up. Minister Li Si greets the imperial preceptor, the official announced. Seeing how fiercely Ing Zheng protected the newcomer, Li Si was the first to pivot and show his support. Minister Feng Qiji greets the imperial preceptor, followed another. Meng Yi greets the imperial preceptor. Neishi Tung greets the imperial preceptor. With Li Si and the others leading the charge, the rest of the court hurried to follow suit, terrified that being a second too slow might cost them their heads. Even though Chunyu was simmering with resentment, he chose to remain silent under the emperor's icy gaze. Just when everyone thought the matter was settled, another voice suddenly rang out, drawing everyone's attention. Father, Su Fu's crimes in concocting fake elixirs deserve death, but the many scholars involved were merely caught up in his wake, the voice pleaded. Their crimes do not warrant death. I implore your majesty to execute the ringleaders, but spare the rest, to show your imperial mercy. It was the eldest prince, Fu Su, who stepped forward and bowed deeply to Ing Zheng. While Fu Su had his doubts about our protagonist, he was far more concerned with the scholars caught in Su Fu's mess. Your Majesty, aside from the scholars Ho and Lu who participated, the others are facing a disaster they didn't cause. I beg for a lighter sentence, he continued. We beg for your Majesty's mercy. Following Prince Fu Su's lead, a crowd of scholars began to step forward one after another to plead for their lives. In total, the Su Fu case involved 468 people. Among them, 369 were scholars from all across the land. Among those gathered, 99 were Confucian scholars, and it seemed Ho Sheng was desperately trying to escape his own guilt by shifting the blame. Enough, the emperor roared. You keep claiming these scholars were merely caught up in Su Fu's mess and suffered an undeserved disaster. But do you have any idea how they speak of me behind my back, or what they say about our great Qin? Ing Zheng looked at his son with eyes full of disappointment and rage. He had placed such high hopes on Fu Su, yet the prince remained obsessed with benevolence, utterly lacking the decisive ruthlessness a true emperor requires. To make matters worse, Fu Su sided with Chunyu in demanding a return to the old feudal system, a move that would shake the very foundations of the empire. We should note that while Fu Su's pursuit of kindness wasn't entirely wrong, since a nation built only on blood and iron cannot endure forever, he had forgotten that an emperor must also be able to strike. He was like a tiger without its claws, a king of beasts in name only, unable to command the world. It was a simple enough lesson, yet one that Fu Su seemed completely unable to grasp. And so, the argument continued. I may not understand everything, father, but I know that slaughter cannot last forever, Fu Su argued. The hearts of the 6 conquered nations have not yet returned to us, and the Confucians are the most prominent school of thought in the land. He stubbornly continued to plead for the scholars. Our protagonist couldn't help but think that Fu Su was being incredibly foolish, a real father-pitter, as they say. It was no wonder a single fake decree from Zhao Gao would eventually lead to his downfall. Watching Fu Su clash with Ing Zheng, our protagonist simply shook his head. If Great Qin were handed over to someone like Fu Su or Hu Hai, it would be doomed. He decided then and there that he had to prevent such a disaster. Meanwhile, Ing Zheng was reaching his breaking point. He hadn't expected his eldest son to defy him so repeatedly, showing a complete disregard for the bigger picture. It was beyond foolish. It was the kind of soft-heartedness that gets people killed. Just as Ing Zheng was about to banish Fu Su from Xianying to make him wake up, he heard our protagonist's inner thoughts. This brought the emperor a sudden sense of relief. Yes, of course, he had his imperial preceptor. Preceptor, what is the meaning of this? Fu Su asked, knitting his brows and turning his gaze toward our protagonist. Exactly what it sounds like, he replied. I am saying you are soft-hearted, foolish to the extreme, and nothing more than a polished exterior with a hollow core. The faces of everyone in the hall turned pale at those words. Although Ing Zheng hadn't named an heir, Fu Su was the eldest son, and famous for his morality. Many officials supported his claim to the throne, yet here was our protagonist, treating the prince as if he were utterly worthless. The audacity was staggering. "How dare you?" Chunyu shouted, defending Prince Fu Su's reputation for benevolence, wisdom, and filial piety against such insults. He stepped forward to scold our protagonist, as Fu Su was his most prized student and the very foundation of his own pride. He simply couldn't tolerate such slander. But instead of arguing, our protagonist moved with blinding speed, closing the distance until he stood right before Chunyu. It was a shocking sight, a seemingly harmless imperial preceptor resorting to violence over a mere disagreement, and doing so right in front of the emperor. To strike someone in such a solemn imperial court was practically treasonous, yet Zheng didn't even flinch at the display. It was clear just how much favor and indulgence the emperor granted him. "You dare hit me?" Chunyu stammered, completely dazed by the heavy blow. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth as he collapsed. Without a word, our protagonist drew the sharp blade from his waist. The cold glint of the steel and the palpable killing intent sent the surrounding officials scrambling backward in terror, wondering what madness had taken hold. "They don't want to listen to me," he noted calmly, "but my strength suppresses them, so they remain silent despite their rage. This is power." He pointed out that while Fu Su preached for benevolence and returning land to the old nobles to win hearts, he failed to understand a basic truth. Peace is forged through the sword, not through empty kindness. On the northern borders, where the Xiongnu raid constantly, talk of virtue is useless. Only by slaughtering the enemy until they fear to return can true peace be achieved. "This is nothing but sophistry," Fu Su cried out. The prince refused to listen, dismissing the logic as a mere trick of words. Our protagonist sighed inwardly, thinking the boy might be beyond saving. Still, he decided to try one last time, quoting a classic text about the wise man who keeps his tools hidden until the right moment. He spoke of acting only when the time is right to ensure success. "Do you understand the meaning of these words?" he asked. "Of course I do," Fu Su replied confidently. The prince was surprised to hear our protagonist quoting Confucian scholars and felt a smug sense of superiority as he prepared to explain. To be fair, Fu Su was genuinely talented and knew the classics by heart, reciting the origin of the quote with perfect precision. "Then do you know the most important lesson behind it?" our protagonist pressed. Fu Su hesitated, suggesting it was about seizing fleeting opportunities. He had never truly looked deeper into the intent. "Wrong," our protagonist countered. "The most important part of that lesson is the man himself." He explained that a wise man keeps his tools hidden, for only with true strength can one seize an opportunity and soar when the moment finally arrives. Without that strength, talking of grand ideals is nothing but an empty facade that leads to zero achievement. "You claim to follow Confucianism," our protagonist challenged. He pointed out that if Fu Su didn't even grasp the core essence of those teachings, his words were hollow, causing the prince's face to pale as sweat beaded on his forehead. For a long moment, Fu Su stood there in stunned silence. The other scholars wanted to intervene, but seeing the cold glint of our protagonist's sword, they thought better of it. None of them dared to utter a single word. As for Chunyu, the combination of that heavy blow and the sheer humiliation was simply too much for him. The scholar's blood boiled with rage until he simply fainted away. "Go back and rewrite every Confucian classic," our protagonist commanded the dazed prince. He told him to annotate every sentence with his own reflections and not to return until he truly understood them. With that, he turned to leave the hall. He left the civil and military officials standing there in a daze, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Truly, he lived up to the title of imperial preceptor. We see that even his knowledge of the classics ran deep. Watching him walk away, Zheng wasn't angry at the abrupt departure. Instead, he was marveling at the man's talent. It seems the emperor has his own double standards when it comes to brilliance. Li Si and Meng Yi watched him go with complex expressions, their minds racing. They realized that the very weather of the great Qin Empire was about to change. Once our protagonist's figure had completely vanished from sight, the session ended. Zheng didn't bother continuing the meeting and dismissed the court. Fu Su remained frozen for a long time before finally coming to his senses, a new clarity in his eyes. It was as if a mist had been lifted. Meanwhile, our protagonist had already returned to his quarters, quite pleased with his dramatic exit, to wait for his rewards. With Su Fu's execution now a certainty, a massive reward was guaranteed, and perhaps even that slap to Chunyu would count for something. Suppressing his inner excitement, he returned to the quiet, somewhat repetitive journey of his cultivation. Suddenly, the system announced his success in stopping Su Fu. By preventing Fu Su's exile to the borders, the destiny of Great Qin had been bolstered, granting him the powerful feedback of the Great Achievement level. He had unlocked the Iron Cloth technique. As one of the 4 divine arts of the Shaolin Temple, reaching mastery meant his body would be covered in a golden aura, making him immune to any blade or spear. He also received spiritual essence water, a source filled with ancient energy that could extend life and improve one's physical constitution if consumed regularly. Finally, he gained the Encyclopedia of Herbs, allowing him to instantly master the effects and identification of every medicinal plant under the sun. This knowledge also allowed for the perfect fusion of various medicinal herbs into potent pills, and he even received a premium beef hot pot from the immortal realm. This divine hot pot contained the finest cuts of beef and was a true delicacy of the human world. After reviewing this wave of rewards, our protagonist didn't hesitate to master both the iron cloth technique and the Encyclopedia of Herbs. Instantly, his mind was flooded with a vast wealth of botanical knowledge, while his body tensed as his muscles rapidly contracted and expanded. It was as if his entire frame were being draped in a thin, gauze-like layer of golden light. He experimentally struck his own chest twice, producing a metallic clanging sound like stone hitting iron. He felt truly powerful, realizing he was now genuinely invulnerable to blades and spears with no weaknesses. Feeling every part of his body strengthened, he smiled with deep satisfaction. Next, he took out a portion of the spiritual essence water to try. It tasted as sweet and refreshing as mountain spring water. He drank it all in one gulp. Soon, the spiritual water entered his dantian and reacted with his modest true qi like calm water suddenly brought to a boil. It surged violently through his limbs and internal organs, and his previously stagnant cultivation level easily reached the 4th level of qi refining. It continued toward the 5th, finally stopping only after breaking through to the 7th level. Striking while the iron was hot, and seeing how effective the spiritual energy was, he immediately took another portion. His calmed true qi became restless once more, continuing to conquer new heights within his body. Finally, after consuming 2 portions of spiritual essence water, he jumped from the 3rd level of qi refining straight to the 9th. His blood and qi were now as strong as a blazing sun, making him like a human beast with soaring energy. However, such a rapid breakthrough meant the spiritual energy in his body was drained. Since he hadn't yet transcended his mortal needs, he naturally had to replenish his energy through food. Conveniently, the system had rewarded him with that beef hot pot. He ordered his servants to prepare a pot immediately, and once everything was ready, he pulled the system-rewarded beef out of thin air. "Imperial Preceptor, if I may be so bold, what meat is this?" asked the head eunuch. Lier, who was waiting nearby, he began to panic, though not because of our protagonist's seemingly divine and magical methods of conjuring items. The servants knelt on the ground, their faces pale with terror. Ever since the reforms of Shangyang, the Qin state had relied on oxen for farming. To protect these strategic resources, Qin had established incredibly harsh laws. According to Qin law, all cattle in the country were inspected and ranked 4 times a year. Those with excellent results were rewarded, but if the oxen grew thin or injured, the responsible officials faced heavy fines and floggings. After Yingzheng unified the world, he added a new decree. Anyone caught killing, selling, or eating beef would be executed on the spot. This rule effectively forced beef out of the market, leaving mutton and dog meat to become the dominant staples of the era. Yet here he was, not only preparing to eat beef, but doing so openly right under Yingzheng's nose, a move that seemed almost suicidal. As the emperor's favorite, he might survive such a transgression, but these poor servants feared they would be the ones to pay the price. Looking at the panicked Lier, our protagonist finally realized he was in the Qin dynasty, not the modern world where beef is a common meal. Eating beef here was a direct violation of Qin law. Suddenly, a voice announced, "His Majesty has arrived." The servants hoped for a slim chance of survival, but Yingzheng had arrived so quickly that hiding the evidence was now impossible. "Don't panic, I have my ways," he told them. He wasn't exactly a saint, but he wasn't the type to let others take the fall for his actions. Since ancient times, merits could offset faults. He figured he could simply perform a new service to cancel out this minor culinary transgression. Instead of hiding, he tossed the hot pot base and beef bones into the pot, calmly waiting for Yingzheng while the aroma filled the air. Yingzheng had been dealing with state affairs since the morning assembly ended, but he had run into a thorny problem he couldn't solve. He had come seeking help, but as soon as he stepped into the Qingtian palace, a unique and mouth-watering scent caught his attention. "Your Majesty, please have mercy," the eunuchs and maids cried out, immediately dropping to their knees in terror as the emperor approached. Yingzheng was utterly confused. He wondered if he had truly become so frightening that his mere presence caused such a scene. "Your Majesty, this has nothing to do with them. I was hungry, so I prepared some beef," our protagonist said, gesturing for the emperor to sit. He casually dipped a slice of beef into the pot and ate it with relish, while Lier and the others broke into a cold sweat at his boldness. Yingzheng's expression became a bit strained. If he remembered correctly, and he usually did, he had personally banned the consumption of beef. The penalty was death, yet here was the imperial preceptor breaking the law. Of course, an actual execution was out of the question. Yingzheng found himself in a bind. He had personally issued the decrees and written them into Qin law. If he didn't lead by example, everyone would start eating beef. And if that happened, who would be left to plow the fields? Deep down, he felt the imperial preceptor had handed him a truly difficult problem, yet his body betrayed him as he sat down. He naturally picked up his chopsticks and took a piece of beef. It was delicious. As the saying goes, merits are rewarded and faults are punished, and our protagonist saw an opening. I once saved your majesty's life, he said, his voice muffled as he frantically stuffed more food into his mouth. Let's just use that to cancel out this particular crime, shall we? Zheng raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on his lips. He remembered quite clearly that the preceptor had previously refused any rewards with such righteous dignity. To see him bring it up now, just to save his skin, was amusing. Zheng was about to haggle over the price, but seeing how fast the food was disappearing, he made a wise choice. He immediately switched into feast mode himself. Other matters could wait. Eating was the priority. And so, we see the two of them devouring the meal with gusto. The surrounding eunuchs and maids watched in utter disbelief. They had been told eating beef was a capital offense, so why were these two enjoying it so much? Half an hour later, they had finished every last scrap of beef. Patting his slightly bloated stomach, Zheng let out a satisfied burp, a rare lapse in imperial decorum. Savoring the aftertaste, he asked where this beef had come from, as it was incredibly tender and juicy. This method of cooking was also quite peculiar to him. It seemed Zheng suddenly had 100,000 questions, looking at our protagonist with pure curiosity. He explained that this beef was obtained through a secret method. He claimed it wasn't a common ox from the mortal realm, and that this style of eating was called hot pot, where various ingredients are cooked together in a shared vessel. He patiently explained the process to the emperor. Zheng nodded seriously, looking very much like a man who truly understood, or at least, a man who wanted to. Deciding not to punish the others, Zheng waved his hand and dismissed the servants. He had come here to discuss much more serious matters of state with the preceptor. The servants thanked the emperor profusely and hurried away, grateful to have kept their heads. Once the room was cleared, the atmosphere shifted to business. Preceptor, I have encountered a problem, and coincidentally, it involves cattle, Zheng said, hoping the man across from him could provide a solution. He handed over several bamboo scrolls. Looking at the dense, wall-to-wall characters on the slips, our protagonist felt a sudden headache coming on. Your Majesty, there isn't a single punctuation mark in this entire text. Doesn't your head hurt from reading this? Zheng blinked, looking completely lost. Since meeting the preceptor, the emperor often felt like an uneducated man. He knew every individual word, but when they were strung together like this, he was baffled. But for our protagonist, this was the call of a system reward. He knew that as long as he provided the answer Zheng sought, the system would surely provide. Our protagonist realized that teaching Zheng the art of punctuation and spreading it nationwide would surely bolster the Great Qin's cultural prosperity. After about 2 hours of patient instruction, the emperor finally grasped the preliminary use of these strange symbols. Imperial preceptor, look at this, he said. Having just mastered the basics, Zheng couldn't wait to revise a bamboo scroll, showing it off with the pride of a student who just finished his homework. He handed it over, watching our protagonist's reaction with an expression that looked remarkably like a child eager for praise from a teacher or parent. Your Majesty is truly brilliant to master the application of punctuation so quickly, our protagonist remarked, a casual compliment that left Zheng beaming with joy. Not at all, the emperor replied. It is only because the preceptor is so learned. Without these marks, I never knew reading memorials could be so simple. Zheng looked at the text in his hands, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. Once revised with punctuation, the documents were far easier to review. The text was now clean, organized, and quite comfortable to read. Preceptor, if you don't mind, I intend to promote this system to the entire world in your name. He wanted every soul in the land to use these marks. Our protagonist simply nodded with a smile. After all, he had no reason to refuse such a generous offer. Deep down, he wanted his knowledge to be used by everyone to strengthen the Qin's destiny and, more importantly, to trigger those sweet system rewards. Excellent, Zheng exclaimed, taking one last self-satisfied look at his punctuated scroll before turning his attention back to the more pressing matters at hand. Preceptor, it is currently the season for spring plowing, but we have a severe shortage of oxen. Local officials are all asking for more livestock, but our supply is limited. Zheng began to vent his frustrations. Since he had unified the 6 states and quieted the Xiongnu, the world had technically found a moment of peace. However, successive years of droughts and floods had left him deeply troubled. To save and resettle the refugees, he had practically emptied the imperial treasury. Despite his efforts, many still called him a tyrant, a label he didn't bother to explain away, knowing it was mostly the work of bitter remnants from the fallen states. These rebels were busy deluding the ignorant masses, but the empty treasury remained a grim reality. And now, the spring plowing presented a critical test. If the oxen weren't in place, the autumn harvest would inevitably suffer. A drop in grain production meant they would face a massive food crisis by next year. If another natural disaster struck, this vicious cycle would leave the people starving, a recipe for disaster in any era, to be perfectly honest. Such a situation would surely breed more rebellions. Listening to Zheng's worried rambling, our protagonist knew exactly what the emperor was fishing for. Zheng clearly hoped he had a magical solution for the cattle shortage, but the emperor was overestimating him. He wasn't a literal god, after all. Doubling the number of oxen overnight was simply unrealistic. Even in 5,000 years of history, no immortal had ever possessed a spell to make cattle multiply instantly. While making more oxen appear was impossible, our protagonist noted he had a method to effectively reduce the demand for them by half. Zheng felt a flicker of disappointment, realizing he had become perhaps too dependent on the preceptor, but his ears perked up at the second half of that sentence. Reducing the demand by half was practically the same as doubling the supply, which would perfectly satisfy the plowing needs of every region this year. I beg the preceptor to enlighten me, Zheng said, overjoyed as he stood up and bowed with his hands clasped in deep respect. The method was actually quite simple. They just needed to replace the current straight shaft plow with a curved shaft plow. Replacing the straight with the curved? Zheng asked. The emperor was understandably confused. He knew the straight shaft plow well, as it was the standard tool used by every farmer across the entire world. This traditional method required 2 oxen to pull a heavy horizontal bar, along with at least 3 or 4 strong men to manage the team. One man led the oxen while others controlled the depth and direction of the blade, a clumsy process necessitated by the straight shaft's rigid design. Because it was so heavy and straight, the blade often slipped out of the soil as the oxen moved, making it difficult to turn or plow deeply. Between the shortage of oxen and the sheer weight of the equipment, even with 4 men working together, the amount of land they could plow in a day was pitifully small. But the curved shaft plow our protagonist mentioned was something entirely unheard of. The idea was to curve the main beam of the frame. This simple adjustment meant a task that once required 2 oxen and 4 men could now be done by a single man and 1 ox. To be honest, it was a revolution. The efficiency of this new tool would be double, or perhaps even triple, the speed of the old ways. With this, the preceptor would surpass the agricultural school of thought to become a saint of farming, and the Great Qin would reap a massive harvest of public support. However, the straight shaft plow had been used for centuries, and no one had ever seen a curved version. Despite his excitement, Zheng felt a bit uneasy. Deep down, he feared this might be too good to be true. Our protagonist assured him that the construction wasn't complex and suggested calling the palace craftsman. He proposed building a prototype so the emperor could see the truth for himself. Pass the order, Zheng shouted. Bring every craftsman in the palace here immediately. A short while later, the palace artisans were gathered together, all of them completely baffled as to why the emperor had summoned them in such a rush. They whispered among themselves, wondering what great event was unfolding, just as Zheng and our protagonist appeared before them. I have summoned you all today, the emperor began. The emperor explained they were there because the preceptor wished to create a new tool, and they were to follow his instructions exactly, promising rewards for their success. The craftsmen, who had been somewhat indifferent at first, suddenly became quite eager and began rolling up their sleeves the moment Zheng mentioned a heavy reward. Our protagonist presented a rough sketch of the curved shaft plow, which, to be honest, was a rather crudely drawn design that left the craftsmen blinking in confusion. They stared at the drawing, their eyebrows twitching. If the preceptor hadn't been there to explain it, they might have mistaken it for a child's random scribbles. Fortunately, with his guidance and their superb skills, the construction wasn't overly difficult, as the curved shaft plow didn't actually require any complex techniques. After working together for over an hour, the first generation of the curved shaft plow was officially completed, marking a significant moment in agricultural history. This tool, which historically wouldn't appear until the Tang dynasty, was now entering the world 900 years early. Zheng stared at it with wide eyes. He felt a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. He had watched the entire process, and the results seemed far less magical than he had originally imagined. It looked like a simple modification of the straight plow, with nothing particularly exotic about it, making it hard for Zheng to believe it was truly as miraculous as claimed. Our protagonist noted that since the prototype was ready, they should find a field to test its effectiveness immediately. Let the results speak for themselves, he suggested. He was also quite excited, knowing that introducing this technology so early would surely bring a massive wave of rewards and prestige to the Great Qin. Zheng quickly chose a nearby plot of land and led the group out of the palace. Now, as the ruler of a nation, his every move was watched by countless eyes. The fact that he had summoned all the craftsmen and was now heading out in a grand procession meant that news of the event spread through the capital instantly. The information flew into the homes of the high officials, reaching the residence of the chancellor, Li Si. He found the emperor's behavior quite peculiar. He wondered why the emperor, having just returned from his eastern tour, was suddenly gathering craftsmen to build something. Li Si frowned, trying to guess the intent. As a minister, trying to read the emperor's mind was a dangerous game. If you guessed wrong, you might face ruin, but if you didn't try to understand him, you were equally lost. It was the classic dilemma of serving a powerful ruler. One must always be prepared with the right answer, or face the consequences of being out of step. Just then, a servant announced that Zhao Gao, the prefect of the palace treasuries, was requesting an audience. Li Si wondered what he could possibly want now. Li Si instinctively frowned at the name. Zhao Gao was known to be a treacherous and sycophantic man who had become quite arrogant after gaining the emperor's trust. He was notorious for his corruption and for forming factions for his own gain, a man who had once been caught in his misdeeds by the official Meng Yi. The officials had demanded Zhao Gao be sent to the death cells, but the emperor had ultimately protected him, forcing the man into a period of quiet submission. As the emperor grew older and his health began to decline, the vacant seat of the crown prince became a target for Zhao Gao, who served as Hu Hai's teacher. Meanwhile, the eldest son Fu Su was devoted to Confucianism, obsessed with abolishing the prefecture system in favor of returning to the old Zhou dynasty feudalism. This created a sharp conflict with legalist scholars like Li Si who championed the current system, leading to an irreconcilable rift between the chancellor and Fu Su. Sensing this tension, Zhao Gao set his sights on Li Si, hoping to join forces to support Hu Hai in the bitter struggle for the imperial succession. However, fighting for the throne was a gamble involving the lives of one's entire clan, and Li Si was not a man to agree to such risks lightly. Furthermore, while Hu Hai was certainly favored by Ying Zhang, he was still seen as a pampered child compared to his elder brother. For these reasons, Li Si had repeatedly rejected Zhao Gao's advances, preferring to stay safe in his role as the Great Qin's chancellor of the left. After a long moment of silence, Li Si finally decided to see what Zhao Gao wanted and told his servant to show the man in.